Alright, guys, give me just a second to get this link dropped over here. Someone else was asking about ticker. I want to make sure they have time to jump in before I actually dive into the stocks. Alright, I think they got it now. Cool. If there are any specific tickers y'all want to see, feel free to throw those into YouTube chat stream there or into either, actually not either, there's three, any of the Discords that I just dropped the link in. And I'll be happy to try to take a look at those as we are going through. Definitely want to touch on some of the bigger tech tickers and things that several of us have been watching today and for several weeks now. And we'll dive in from there. So, NVIDIA, what do we have going on here, right? Like we talked about in the morning session, if you were actually on this morning, if not, go back and watch it. It might be good to see the inside of kind of how things were discussed then versus how they played out. Not in a sense of I was right, but this is what happened, but more so that you can see how uncertainty at certain levels can actually end up playing out, and how situations like on NVIDIA, where I think a lot of people bought the dip as soon as the market opened this morning, and then were really frustrated whenever it kept on diving throughout the day, right? So I'm optimistic that ultimately NVIDIA will actually bounce somewhere in this range. It actually, if you watch the morning session, what I was looking for today was this gap fill right here. Even though that was going to be a hellacious drop in order to fill that gap, and probably one of the biggest drops I think we've ever seen on NVIDIA in a single day, even thinking back to what we saw in this range. That gap, I didn't expect it to be filled in a day per se, but maybe in the coming days, but no, we went straight to it. So we dove hard at open on NVIDIA and bounced at that gap fill right there. It actually moved a little bit lower and then retook it, right? So, sorry, there. So what I want to see here is what NVIDIA can do. I don't like when we have gaps left on the daily, but that's a massive gap for it to try to retake. Maybe it does it ahead of earnings, but that is a massive volume candle as well. You can see back the only other times we really had these huge volume candles were on drops like this, which was that March 2024. I don't know if that was the Russia-Ukraine news or not. I can't recall, honestly. But what you want to see here is whether or not NVIDIA can hold the support range here after that gap fill, or if it consolidates a bit in this range and breaks down harder. The reason why you haven't seen me trading calls or puts as a buyer on NVIDIA is because crap like this. Now, the news over the whole DeepSeek situation caused a very dramatic reaction. That being said, a lot of these tickers had some really weird options movement going on behind the scenes, and the premiums were dangerous on the buyer side. So that's why I sat out and traded other things. There's plenty of other tickers you can trade to make gains, whether you like calls or puts. But NVIDIA, what we're looking for here is whether or not it can get its bounce on, and for one, retake that level in that zone, right? But also, is it going to now treat that like a double top and move lower, or are we going to get a nice bounce and move higher? What I talked about also in the morning session was if NVIDIA broke to the downside there, right, was back testing this trend line that you see here from the previous bullish pennant breakout. You can see we're actually already testing that same demand zone here, so that's a positive sign, but we'll see whether it holds. Right now we don't know whether this bearish momentum is going to carry on with NVIDIA, or if we're going to consolidate or ideally even bounce to move higher. Full disclosure, some of y'all know I hold NVIDIA shares, so like I'm not saying this like with a bias or anything whatsoever. I'm going to look at this from a totally unbiased standpoint, like I do several of these others. So jumping over to Tesla too. So Tesla broke its trend, which is the thing we were watching for here to see what happens. Like I mentioned this morning again, in no way am I advocating trading puts on Tesla here. I'll continue saying what I've said the last few weeks on Tesla, actually last few months probably. I'm not a big fan of swinging calls or puts on Tesla in this range. I will sell premiums all day long on Tesla in this range, which is what I've been doing to hedge my long-term shareholdings, but I can't advocate for anyone to actually trade calls or puts from a swing perspective here because it's gambling. because honestly, this thing can break either direction fast, and you're gonna get burned, right? So it's just not worth it. But what are we looking for on Tesla? We're looking to see if actually we tagged the first measured move to the downside, right? So that target was met. I'm not going to delete it yet, just so we have it for reference since we're still in the range. But what we're looking for here is whether or not it's going to stay in this range and break down further and lose that 379.57 support range. Actually, I'm going to make that a major because we've now tagged it, I think, 6 times. So, or are we going to bounce here off this demand zone that we've now tried to form and move back up? If Tesla can retake that 414.50, which is the critical level that was the previous all-time high before this year, back in 2021, then Tesla can probably move up with strong momentum. Again, still not going to advocate people trading calls on that, just because the danger and the risk and reward is just not worth it. Same thing with puts here. It's one thing to scalp them intraday or something, or I know some of the guys like to trade like random lotto swing puts and stuff like that on Tesla. I'm not doing that here, and I won't alert stuff like that, but just sharing the levels with you so that you have them. If we do break to the downside here, we're probably going to fill the gap at 345.16. So, I mean, if you don't have 100 plus shares and you haven't sold covered calls to hedge already, there's a few different strategies you can take. Hit me up on the messages, either in the YouTube chat or on any of the Discords or Facebook. Feel free to send me a message, and I'll help you kind of look at what position you're in and what the best approach might be to hedge the position. If you have more than 100 shares, you can obviously sell covered calls. If you don't, maybe you do need to take out a put, but with the intent of hedging your long-term position. So right now, watching these ranges on Tesla to see which side it breaks towards at this point. While one thing I want to make sure we cover while we're going through this, while the broader market and everything freaked out and we had all these huge dives on semiconductors, let's note that not everything got wrecked, right? So we actually entered swing calls last week, or I did, and it played out very well today because they hit 53% gains at the first measured move price target I had, which was this gap fill level. And then not only that, we actually built actual strong support here on the 15-minute and then pushed higher. And those things ended up actually moving all the way up to 98% gains at this point, which I trimmed mine here to cover my cost basis, and this is kind of me just talking through how you can trade something like that. Trimmed here to cover cost basis plus net profit, trimmed a little bit more here, which was pure profit at that point, and then left a runner because I want to keep seeing what happens here, plus their March expiration, so they got time if this thing actually does hold that zone. But I saw lots of movement on Apple options last week, as well as it was deep into its demand zone here. And then we printed a reversal candle potentially on the weekly, which this looks like it's going to follow through. What I would like to see on Apple here before feeling stronger longer term on the bullish momentum is retaking of the trends, but also seeing follow through with strong buying volume on this candle. Because the one thing that's not jiving yet is the lacking volume, which if I look at the daily, it's better, right? Weekly, we're early on in the week, so we still got time. But yeah, example that this is like exactly why you don't lump everything into one big bucket and say like the market is red, so therefore trade puts on everything, or the market is green, therefore trade calls on everything. Bad approach, don't do it. Same thing with Amazon. We made great gains on Amazon swing calls today. Yeah, they opened like 20% red, but that was okay. My strategy and approach with those was a light phase in, leaving plenty of room to add to the position if we lost and went to the next support level. So we had room. Honestly, I wish I would have added to them early this morning, but I had back-to-back meetings, so I did not. But it would have been great had I done that. Sorry, I just realized that there's an activate Windows thing right here. I just switched to a new PC this weekend, didn't enter the code apparently. So I'll get that code entered and update there, so hopefully that's not too distracting from y'all, if y'all even noticed it. But yeah, what do we have on Amazon, right? So Amazon is maintaining this bullish continuation that it's had going on here. You can see that I've had marked the bullish target here, as well as if we broke to the downside, what were the bearish target ranges for that setup. So I'm loving this setup right now. Not only is that a very big fat bullish candle with strong buying volume, it also is a bullish engulfing candle. So Amazon's actually looking quite good right here as long as it can maintain that range. That 230 level is really the key level that I want to see Amazon hold above. Ideally, I didn't love us dipping all the way here, but I'm okay with that because it's a back test of trend. So I'll keep riding out those swing calls. I did trim a little bit for gains, but I'm going to ride out the remainder of the contracts because they have plenty of time. So let's see what else is on the list. People requested SoFi. Yes, we will look at SoFi. We'll look at SPY, QQQ. Let's hit SoFi, then we'll come back to the big tech tickers and QQQ and SPY. SoFi, so they had earnings today. Today was a good example of why I strongly advocate for taking profit ahead of earnings, because even when companies have great earnings like SoFi did, they killed it on earnings, yet we dove with the broader market sentiment as well as earnings profit taking, right? So this is why I took gains on a lot of my swing calls on Friday, and then I left a few runners just to keep riding out the positions in case it did get a strong move to the upside. Today actually gave a great opportunity to start phasing into longer term swing calls on it again. So I started doing that. So yeah, what do I want to see on SoFi? I want to see it retake that support zone that is now a resistance. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see SoFi rip and push back up to gap fill at some point, especially if we get positive momentum on the broader markets and some retracement with FOMC later this week. I think that we'll see a nice push up to the upside on SoFi. Let's look at AMD real quick, because this is another one that I think people prematurely went way bullish on when both sides of the setup were in play. So last week, I'll look at the weekly candles here. We'll just jump straight to daily. Why not? So last week when we poked our head above that trend line, I know a lot of people were like, oh, it's time to YOLO heavy on calls. No, don't do that. Wait for follow through and confirmation, especially whenever you're looking at overall prevailing trend with a high, a low, a high, a lower low, a lower high, a lower low, a lower high, a lower low, and so on, right? So what is this here? This is a lower high. This is a lower low, potential lower high. We have not formed a higher high yet. And here we are now back underneath the trend line. So this is why it's important to be patient about stuff. I'm really bullish long term on AMD. Maybe I'm biased on that because I'm big on AMD processors in general. There's one literally running this live stream on the PC I just built. So big fan of AMD long term, but from a technical standpoint, I'm not looking to add long-term calls or shares at this point until I see a reversal actually forming. Because as of right now, don't have a reversal formed. I do like that if you look here on a smaller time frame, I'll do it on the 1 hour so you can see it. I like that this actually held that 113.06 level and even then pushed above the 114.84 support, which I'm actually going to make a major support at this point because look, we got test. So obviously a strong support in that zone. What do I want to see here? Here I want to see AMD, whether or not it continues this bear flag breakdown. Because if you look at the 4 hour, sorry for jumping all over the place. The 4 hour, we had a bear flag that had formed here, and we broke to the downside. We retraced to reject off that trend line, and here we are. So as of right now, these little retracement bounces are where things get dangerous for people that only trade bullish setups. You can maybe be okay if you're trading longer term, like swing calls that are leaps or something. Still not going to advocate for it because I saw so many people do it on the previous flags that we had on AMD. They started going into June contracts, and the last I looked on 2 of those June contracts, they were down like 90% or something at this point. So just because it's further out doesn't mean it's safe. If things consolidate flat, range bound, and they break down, those contracts get burned too. So what do I want to see on AMD? I want to see whether or not it can retake the range and maybe form an actual reversal, or if it's going to move to the downside here and actually complete this measured move for the bear flag breakdown. So we'll see what happens the coming days. I think the broader market sentiment with semiconductors is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But that's what we have right there. Google. So Google's actually, I might have to consider. I'm gonna look at the contract premiums on Google tomorrow. I've been staying away from Google just because I really like the bullish setup here, and I want to lean into it. But I know that the premiums are a bit wacky on some of these bigger tech tickers right now. Also, combined with the fact that all it takes is one antitrust lawsuit for Google to drop like 10% in a freaking day. So risk to reward might be a little skewed. I'm gonna look and see if there's some cheaper contracts that really could benefit from even a move back up to that 197 range on Google. Also, this thing could break either direction though, so that's why I keep on holding off on entry. There's a lot of other things I can trade right now without the risk, so that's why I've held off on that. Again, no issues with scalping intraday, like if you're in and out, but sitting on something in swings is dangerous right now, so just be careful with that. This is the key levels, just so that y'all have them. It's the upside target on Google would put it at about 212. If we can get over the key psychological level of 200, but then also downside targets here, pretty steep drop, right? So just be cautious. Microsoft, so watching multiple directions and setups here on Microsoft. Ideally, if we can break out of this pennant to the upside, my short-term target there would be the 466. And then larger setup here would even push the 540. But that could take weeks or months to formulate if we break out to the upside. So we do have earnings coming up this week, right? So that's going to be interesting to see whether the earnings actually help it get a bullish breakout to the upside of this, or if it's going to send it to the bottom of this green pennant, because the green pennant is ultimately, maybe I should make it green and red so that it's a little bit more realistic of both sides can play out, because this pennant right now is basically a bullish pennant that's almost neutral because this consolidation range has been so long. That being said, the longer you consolidate like this, the more of a spring coiled reaction you can tend to have. So I'm watching both of these setups. I'm not actively trading calls or puts on Microsoft here, and I will never advocate somebody to do that in a setup like this, which is why I haven't the last couple of months. I know I've caught flack for that, but why risk something like that whenever I can trade stuff like Hood that had a very clear setup and I could trade over and over again? Same thing with SoFi, Sound, and about 15 other tickers. So cheaper contracts, better risk to reward, not in this choppy tight range zone. That drop today, pretty steep drop. I do like that it filled that back up pretty quick. That being said, I'll feel a little bit better. I'm gonna mark this gap fill before I forget. I'm sorry, not gap fill, but this gap that has yet to be filled here. Okay, so like I said, it'll be interesting to see if earnings this week helps Microsoft to make a decision on the longer term, because if you look at the weekly, I mean, really, like, I love the bullish setup here and the bullish pennant that we formed, but we also have this head and shoulders on that consolidation range. So both of those things are intact. I'll be watching to see what happens here, which way it breaks down. If I was going to trade something on Microsoft, I'd probably trade like post earnings and trade the momentum of whichever direction it breaks its move, maybe as a quick intraday move or a scalp trade. But watching both of these setups right now, completely unbiased just to see what happens. Meta, so we jump over the daily. Meta is making a beautiful move to the upside, shooting towards, I'm sorry, we scalped a bunch of short dated contracts on this last week, so let me remove some of that so it's not so messy and it doesn't hurt your eyes. There you go. We made some awesome games on meta puts on Friday. But yeah, I love this bullish engulfing daily candle here on Meta with strong buying volume. Again, this one also has earnings this week, so you want to be cautious. I'm not actively trading calls or puts on a setup like this in this range. I do have some Meta shares, same thing with Google and Microsoft and some others in my longer term investment accounts. I probably should have hedged some of those, but I don't have as many shares of those as I do of things like Tesla and NVDA and others where I can actually sell covered calls to hedge those accordingly. So watching this on Meta, we'll see if earnings helps it push to the upside or if we're going to break to the downside of the trend. But ultimately, both setups are intact, right? But overall, bullish momentum and sentiment is going well here on Meta. We'll see what shakes out in the coming days with earnings. Netflix, same thing here, following earnings last week. Actually, so we had earnings. Let me show y'all something because I was talking through it with Tomorrow Coin over in the Discord. He jumped into something I think right after earnings. It was TMC. I'm sorry that he was talking about, but the same thing applies here. Typically after earnings, what you see is a very tight range movement to where they burn contracts on both sides. Now, people benefited from calls greatly on this, which, again, earnings like that is a gamble completely and totally. Any experienced trader will tell you that. You either stay out of earnings, trade sympathy tickers, they get movement off of earnings from that stock that you're watching, or you are long on it maybe and you have something to hedge accordingly. But most of the time with earnings, both sides of contracts get burned because it doesn't make a move big enough to offset the implied move on the options contracts. So what have we done on Netflix since last week? Ideally, I would like to have seen us push towards a gap fill, but that was a hell of a gap. So that's why we haven't seen that yet. Instead, we've got consolidation in that zone and potentially formation of a bullish pennant here and a bull flag. But contracts are expensive on it. I'm not going to trade them actively right now. I'll trade other stuff. Nice little setup though. We'll see whether it plays out and makes that continued upside movement for the measured move towards 1100. That was actually my target for the last, 2 months or so. It was around the $1,100 range based off of the momentum, the flag formation, the breakout. Again, not actively trading it, monitoring it more so. I expect that they get closer to the 1100 range and then they do a stock split, right? So watching that. If you're just now joining in, we touched on NVIDIA earlier on in the video, so I'm going to jump past now and look at SMCI. So SMCI kind of been doing this tight range bound thing, which I haven't traded this thing in a while now. Just because you could tell in the options movement that it wasn't going to have a wide range of movement, as well as like it works well for intraday scalps and stuff, but swinging right here could go either direction, so risk to reward's just not worth it. SMH, semiconductor ETF, right? So obviously this thing took a big clap today. It didn't quite hit my upside measured move last week that I had with the breakout for the high. I think it came up just short of it, which I'm not actively trading it. I'm monitoring both sides of the setup because the sentiment for semiconductors as a whole is hitting the whole space. And that's what a lot of the market movement we've seen the last, 18 to 24 months has been around semiconductors. Thus the dramatic reaction on QQQ and SPY today, right? But SMH, again, both setups are fully intact here. If you look at the weekly, it's consolidating a pretty wide zone here, but it's getting tighter. That break here arguably could be considered a break to the downside of that consolidation. It definitely broke this uptrend it was in here. I'll draw it just so you can see it. But I'm not trading it straight up like that, and honestly I would rather, if I was trading it, I'd be looking for follow through to see just the market sentiment and the movement today. Was it just a parabolic reaction to some news, or is there going to be continued downside that comes with semiconductors as a whole, right? Because technically this is now back in the downtrend. So watching that, see what happens. Tesla, did we touch Tesla earlier? Can't recall. Maybe one of y'all can tell me in the chat, but I feel like I touched NVIDIA and Tesla already, but I think I might have not done Tesla. So, the quick recap on Tesla here is we broke the trend. Now we see if we did. I remember talking about that now. Sorry. Been a long couple of weeks. And apologies as well for those that have been watching these streams and stuff and are like, where did he go for like a week or two? Because I didn't do any live streams last week, the week before. I had to go to Finland and Estonia for work, so it's a little hard to do some live streaming. Watching this setup here though on QQQ, right? If I look at the weekly, it's really interesting because a lot of this movement came from NVIDIA, right? We're still in an uptrend here. We're consolidating nicely. The thing that's interesting on QQQ and SPY today is that, yeah, they filled one gap to the downside. Actually, let me take that back. Did we ever fill the gap, or did we just get really, really close? We filled the gap perfectly. See, this is why tracking gaps and filling is very, very important. So we filled that gap and bounced right at the gap fill. So that was good. That being said, be careful on all these little retracement bounces because these could or could not be reversals. We have no way of knowing yet whether or not they're going to be a reversal. If you looked at this chart last week, there's actually a green measured move to the upside, and we tagged it, so I removed it. But ultimately, right now, I'm actually surprised because we like marked the green upside move that was here and the red downside move, and it's not often you see literally within a 5 trading day span hitting the topside target for something like an index and then immediately moving back and being in the downside range too. So watching this to see what happens, watching NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, some of the other big tech players that are top weighted contributors to see what direction they drive this. But as of right now, this could go either way. If you look at the weekly here, you've got a high, right? Then we've got a, let's see, high, low, lower high, lower low, higher high potentially, right? So we'll see there whether or not that plays out that way. Really, we're early in the week, so we got to see how tech reacts and if there's follow through on a lot of this selling that we saw today, or if buying picks back up and we have strong demand zones to bounce off of. So Amazon and Apple were looking strong today, so that held up tech quite a bit. But we'll see what happens in the coming days. SPY, hell of a gap down too. SPY was the one that I was watching all day, waiting to see if it was going to fill this gap right here at 594.35, and it didn't. So watch out and see if that thing actually breaks more to the downside to fill that gap. We've also got a gap way down here too. FOMCs this week and several other key events. We could see a very strong bounce on SPY and a lot of other tickers as well with that news. So it could be, this big drop gets filled right back in. I'm not going to advocate somebody trading calls on something like that and trying to catch a falling knife in case it does break to the downside when there's so many other tickers you can trade that make more sense, right? So keeping an eye on that. Have no idea why SINS is in this watch list. IWM though. So IWM completed the upside targeted move right there today. You can see that was a measured move last week and today, but it also rejected at the trend yet again. So this trend line on IWM has been giving it hell. I look at it on the daily, maybe it's a little bit cleaner. Another one that we traded scalps on, so there's a lot of stuff going on here. I'm going to go ahead and delete this just to make it a little bit clearer. But if this thing rejects it trend hard and gets selling volume, then we can see a play out of this bear flag setup, or we could potentially break out to the upside of the trend line that's been respected thus far. What you want to keep an eye on this week is not whether or not the Fed does an interest rate cut, because the odds are right now, if you look at the actual is it CRC? No. Interest rate. There we go. CME, duh. If you look at this watch tool, I think the odds right now are basically we stay where we are. Like no rate cut, no rate hike, no nothing, right? So market's already priced that in. A lot of these small caps and mid caps are looking for rate cuts for benefits. Trump is really bullish about rate cuts and getting interest rates down, so that's benefiting them. That's why you saw the big move to the upside on IWM. Also, you got sector rotation coming into play with all the money flows coming out of NVIDIA and others. But that being said, what you need to look for with FOMC this week is not whether or not they cut rates, because they're not going to, right? Instead, what you want to look for is what the dot grid and dot graph look like, and what the Fed's outlook is for 2025, and whether or not they're going to have rate cuts coming in 2025 or not, based off what we know right now. So, going to be watching that right now, see what's happening. SPX, y'all know what SPX is. Some of y'all do. Scalp some freaking calls off SPX. Let me show y'all this setup, because SPX is a very fast moving monster, but man, it can burn you if you don't know what you're doing. So I'll show you the setup we traded earlier today on SPX because it was sweet. So I traded the breakout move here of this downtrend because I saw the gamma need to be offset on the option. So it got the breakout here, traded 60-15 calls. Even though they didn't go in the money, they still went 500 something % gains right here. Lock profits at the resistance, and that was that, right? So SPX, definitely keep an eye on that. For those of you who don't know, SPY is basically an ETF or a overall consolidation of many stocks that are within the S&P 500. So other tickers. Let me see. Hey, precautious listening, love it. Crypto. Let me show you why I'm not freaking out on crypto again, since I feel like we have this conversation every other week at this point. Oh, look, bullish momentum. So, sorry, that might have been a little sarcastic, but every time we get these dips like today, and semiconductors have been very weak underlying, like when you looked at behind the scenes, it like not at face value, and I think that's where people got trapped, whereas crypto has maintained bullish momentum both on the technical charts as well as on the underlying movements and the fundamentals following crypto cycles, as well as the overall whale movement on wallets. So if I look at the weekly on Bitcoin, this is still very much bullish on Bitcoin. Okay, look, we're holding it. We caught a very solid bounce today off of that. I'm doing one of those top step futures accounts. I'm probably gonna switch over and trade me some Bitcoin futures on that thing to get that account growing again. But yeah, looking for the measured move and continuation here. So many bullish catalysts coming up for crypto in the coming weeks and months, so definitely keep an eye on that. Many other cryptos caused a little bounce today. I mean, look at XRP on larger time frame. There's a beautiful bullish pennant breakout right there that is playing out, and then we got the pullback with today, and then nice solid bounce off the range, right? I think we glanced at a few of these this morning. I'm not even gonna waste time talking through because we talked about this morning. Solana, great opportunity to add to long terms going on right there. If you are into crypto and looking for something that you want to add to, level 1 crypto right there, Solana is a great option. Doge looks like it's trying to catch its bounce off that trend line still that was respecting this morning. Doge has got this thing where it likes to go in really tight ranges, and I don't know about y'all, over the years I've gotten to where I don't actively trade crypto itself, like the actual assets. I will hold it in long-term cold storage holdings. If I'm going to trade crypto, I'm trading leverage crypto futures. That way I get more exposure, more leverage. I can benefit from the moves to the upside and downside, regardless of what's going on with the broader markets in crypto. So ADA, yeah, we're there. XLM's another one I want y'all to keep an eye on, because if we bounce solid here, which it looks like we're about to, XRP and XLM are your two indicators in a sense that will tell you whether or not there's big movement about to come to crypto. Most of the time, if you see XRP or XLM getting a big spike but nothing else is moving yet, you've got well movement if you go look at the wallet flows, where they're shifting over XLM or XRP from wallet to wallet on hot exchanges, so that they can then use that to swap it for USDT or swap it for other crypto assets they want to purchase. So those two are kind of the go-to for those of us that have been in crypto for a long time, because it has low fees, very fast transactions, all that good stuff. HBAR is another one to definitely keep an eye on, because it's it's right there with XRP in relation to the US and potential tax benefits coming from Trump, which I know people are really hyped about no taxes on crypto based out of the US, but if we're being real, that's kind of silly, because if you know what you're doing with crypto, you shouldn't be paying taxes anyways. Just saying. If you want more info on that, here, I'm going to drop this in the chat so that you can have it without digging deep into it. Basically, if you're not taking paper losses on crypto to offset capital gains on both crypto as well as other types of any kind of trading you're doing for stocks or options, because short-term gains or losses go against short-term gains or losses regardless, you're missing out. So like the tax benefit thing, it's like a hype or one of those things that people are talking about, but it's kind of meaningless to those of us that trade crypto on a more long-term or active standpoint. So that is enough about crypto. Let me make sure I've got all the other tickers that people requested over here on the chat. God, these people, man, like this is why I stopped sharing like a lot of the analysis or the charts in general, even without the detailed analysis on Facebook, is because people get so bullish biased about like NVDA, for instance, where you share a chart showing both respective ranges of it after it broke a key support level, and it's getting a slight retracement right now, and people are just like knocking me over it. So it is what it is. I'll share the stuff. Maybe it'll help the people that aren't gonna think like that. Honestly, I don't. If it helps one or two people, that's great. Let's see. Any other tickers y'all want me to look at before I wrap up? I know I've got quite a few over there on the swing account too. Let me make sure I don't skip out on any of those. Give me just a second. I really wish people would hedge. It's so sad because some of these people knock it and they'll complain about any kind of unbiased opinion of NVIDIA or Tesla or anything, and then they'll be the same people that are really pissed off 6 months from now if we don't catch replacement. Or sorry, I was reading that too. If we don't catch retracement bounces on some of these tickers, because they'll be sitting there and lost and confused on why they're so down on positions. Which honestly, if you're long-term investing on shares on some of this stuff, you don't care. But if that's the case, why are you worried about the day-to-day movements and analysis being provided? Let's see. I covered that already. Okta is one that we'll touch on real quick because I'm still in those calls, or at least runners on them. Ooh. I didn't even look at the weekly today. So Okta in calls in it right now. Check out the breakout. Heck yeah, if we can get the bullish push to the upside of this breakout, go ahead and delete this one since it's not even relevant at this point, but ideally we can get that gap fill up at 95.36, but yeah, this call's already went 181% gains, so watching that to see. Covered my cost basis on it already when we hit 100%, and I will ride out the remaining runners until we have some kind of reversal that says otherwise. We touched on Google. Iron got smacked with the broader, look, if I open up this and I look at like the quantum stocks and stuff, for instance, or even semiconductors, look, semiconductors got hammered today. Wow, Broadcom? What? I didn't even realize Broadcom was down 17 point something percent. Interesting. Yeah, I saw that coming. Some of y'all know why. I'm not going to talk about it. But let's see. Intel, same choppy zone it's been in. And it's still in that range. It might fill that gap and get a little bounce. It's going to stay in the range until it gets some sort of news related to the CEO. Other tickers. Hood's going to bounce back right with crypto. Like, Hood has been tied at the hip with crypto for months now, right? So great opportunity to add to long-term calls on Hood. I should have went ahead and did that today, but I wanted to wait and see and make sure, which we filled that gap. I just didn't have the thing marked on this chart. My bad. There you go. So that's a gap fill. Tony, if you're listening, dude, it might be a good opportunity to either sell cash secured puts on Hood or, long-term shareholdings. Not a bad thing either on Hood. Also, yeah, it's playing out this measured move. Right now, bullish setup still intact. Filled the gap, moving to the upside. We'll see what happens. Crypto keeps running. It's going to keep running. Let's see. Hood. Yep, we covered you. VST. Insane drop. Prakash says. Let me look at VST. Vistra. That is a pretty harsh drop. What is Vistra? What do they do? Utilities. Yeah, you're seeing sector rotation, Prakash. That's why. Here. Like, if you look at some of these others, like Constella got slammed, Vistra got smacked. They have earnings or anything, or no? I don't know. I've honestly not traded Vistra, but I guess I'm guessing you've asked about it before, and that's why I have it charted. Otherwise, I don't think that I'd even have it charted, but Let's see real quick. So Palantir, another one that I went ahead and added some new calls on it because I love this range on Palantir. Also, one of my favorite long-term stocks. Also, maintaining bullish setup here, even with that drop today. Like, look at this. Still bullish setup. Fantastic long-term opportunity right there on that pullback. They do have earnings coming up in February, so keep that in mind. But yeah, as long as Palantir holds this zone, hella bullish, and will continue to push to the upside. Palantir's got multiple benefits coming to it. Let's see. What other tickers do I have on the list over here? Chewy. What's Chewy doing? Oops. Chewy's still looking bullish. Love it. So really, Chewy just needs to get that upside breakout here with some volume is what it needs. It's got lacking volume right now, so Ryan Cohen needs to go throw up a tweet or something to get this thing slinging for us. But yeah, I'm still in some of the swing calls on Chewy. I locked some gains on them last week when we were at 71% gains, but I'm still riding runners because I want to see this thing break out and move higher. SoFi we already looked at. IWM. So yeah, Applied Digital is another one that got clapped because it's connected to NVDA at this point. That being said, I mean, it's back in a very strong support range for Applied Digital, so good opportunity to either buy shares on Applied Digital or consider like longer term calls. Just maybe ideally you wait till we get back above that support level here, like that 677 support would be a good opportunity to add to calls or enter new calls, because I think most of us locked our gains on Applied Digital already. But yeah, watching that setup there, I might actually add shares myself tomorrow. I'm gonna put that on my list over here to do real quick. Let me go. Alright, coin real quick. Yeah, let me look at coin. Actually, here, let's just do this. Coin, maintain bullish breakout weekly. Looking good. MicroStrategy. Maintain bullish breakout. Man, MicroStrategy gave a fantastic buy opportunity on some calls or shares this morning. Wonder if anybody hopped in on that. But same thing with MSTY and its awesome dividend. Looks like it's getting another great opportunity as well since it's tied right there. Yeah, it's holding that support. That's a good buy opportunity if you're into MSTY shares for dividends. Mara, same thing. Holding the back test range here. Riot, same thing, holding the zone. Yeah, that's what's interesting. You've got these very big percentage changes, but these are tickers that literally move that type of range on a weekly basis, so much less concerned about it. But coin, looking solid there. I do have some runner calls still on coin that probably are right around break even right now, but I already covered costs, so I'll keep riding them. Let's see, we did AMD, we did Meta, GME real quick. For Tony. What's for Tony? Tony is holding support range, dude. We'll see what happens. GME's a different kind of beast, though, so we will see what happens with GME. What you need for GME is a Roaring Kitty, Keith Gill tweet of some kind. It doesn't even have to be GameStop related. It just has to be him posting a tweet that someone interprets that they think is somehow related to GameStop, and it will rip. So keep that in mind. Let's see. Let me make sure. Oh, Rocket Lab was another good one, real quick. Rocket Lab's looking good. That's a good buy opportunity on calls, honestly, on Rocket Lab. I'm gonna add that to my list for shares and call. To alert tomorrow, shares and calls. Let me go do some digging on some specific contracts to alert for that. Look at Mobileye real quick, and then I'm gonna wrap up probably, unless here Prakash wants me to look at T too. I'll look at T. And Mobileye's holding that support range too. I might actually go add calls to it. Yeah, so T is interesting. You asked about that, Prakash. I actually was looking at AT&T earlier today. So they had positive earnings. They had good outlook. So from a technical breakout standpoint, if this thing backtests and holds like this level right there, that's a good entry for longs. Like that, I'd rather wait through earnings and enter something on a bullish continuation setup like that rather than gamble going into earnings, right? Now, I don't love that we'd have a gap lingering right here, but that's a nice big breakout there. Weekly looking bullish. Looks like it does have some overhead resistance going on here. There and there. I'm going to do this because it definitely goes back a bit. But yeah, nice bull flag setup going on right there too, is what this breakout was. So if I was to do this, I mean 35% breakout if it does that. Here, we'll even be more conservative and we'll call it 18%, right? Or even more conservative. So if it can hold that breakout there and push above that resistance of 23, it can go 29. So I'd enter and trade that probably according to that rather than prematurely jumping on it. You know, Prakash, come on. You know I'm not going to tell you to buy, sell, or hold something specifically, dude. You know better by now. But cost basis is 16 bucks. I mean, like you're good. Like if you got over 100 shares, not a bad spot to sell covered calls to hedge on it. Or buy cheap put to hedge your shares. Yeah, cool. Alright. I've got to wrap this up and go help hang out with family and all 4 of our crazy kiddos. But if y'all need anything else, feel free to reach out to me on any of the social media platforms, YouTube, Discord, Facebook, whatever. I'll be happy to help. Overall, like I said, this weekend, don't freak out because the markets, quote, are doing something and dropping, because regardless of what the broader markets or big tech or whatever is doing, there's always somewhere to make gains on calls or puts regardless. So just because you kind of stay out of calls or puts, or maybe stay out of calls for swings on some stuff, doesn't mean you're a bear. Like, trade things accordingly to your risk to reward ratio practices, practice risk mitigation, figure out what works for you. For me, I stopped swinging a lot of the big tech tickers, and I don't feel like I've missed out on that by any way, shape, or form, because I mean ultimately, like, look here, I'll show y'all this real quick. Where is do this? So even last week when some of those big tech tickers were going up to new highs, right? Let me don't know why that didn't show up for y'all. There we go. Like, even with that, like, going to new highs and stuff last week and not swinging calls on a lot of big tech yet, like, regardless of that, like, look, so many tickers that can still hit gains. I'm not showing this like as like a plug type thing, but more so like showing tickers SoFi, Riot, Intel. I did scalp some QQQ puts, but any of these that say swing phase in, those were all swing trades, and they aren't on big tech tickers, yet they still had huge gains. So you don't have to trade. That was a intraday lotto, but any of these swings, like that was one that we entered late last week. That was late last week. Those were back at 22nd. But so many trades that you don't have to trade the same stuff over and over again within big tech, especially if you've got a smaller account, honestly. Like, I think that smaller accounts, you can trade contracts. Like, look, these were $75 each. These were $277, so those were more expensive overall compared to some of the others. But sharing this more so because you don't have to trade $1,000 contracts and make gains. I know that there's different approaches to stuff, but ultimately, like, the way I try to trade on a lot of this is based off of the given account size I'm using. So if I'm using my larger swing trading account, I may have some of those things in there, but for instance, let's say I was trading a $75 or 0.75 premium contract on Hood, like one of those examples. I can trade more contracts if I really want to on my larger options trading accounts. If I really want more exposure and I want to put more money per trade, Versus if I'm using a small account for a small account challenge, I can also trade, 1 to 3 contracts with that without leveraging my entire account on a single contract. So I say that because you don't have to be hell bent on trading Tesla or NVDA or Apple calls nonstop in order to make gains. There's so many other tickers that you can also incorporate within. If you want a list of some of the other tickers that I like to trade and that others, do well trading with smaller accounts, feel free to hit me up. I don't care if you're in any of the Discords I'm in or not, or on Facebook. Doesn't matter. Just hit me up and I'll be happy to give you a list and share that with you of some of the tickers, or you can notice probably some of them that we go through in some of these sessions, but plenty of other tickers out there to trade, especially for people that are trying to grow or scale an account. I will say, especially for those people that you have traded with something before or traded with someone before, your account got wrecked or burned and you're looking to recuperate, you shouldn't be trading most of this crap right here that's in big tech, because the risk to reward for your account is not going to be worth it on contracts that make sense to swing with a safe time horizon. You can make huge gains percentage wise on so many other things, so keep your head up. Look for people that'll help, whether it's me or someone else, doesn't matter. Find a community and people that are willing to help you and help you learn what works for you, because everything's going to be different for each individual person. But on that note, everyone have a blessed evening. Have fun with your family or friends. If you need anything, feel free to reach out. And we will be back at tomorrow. Thanks all.